This week, I go back to school. We talk meetings. And finally, things start to look up. So it's Monday morning, first one in the office, no one else here yet. Just trying to work out what's got to get done for the rest of the week. Again, overnight, had a little go at this to make sure that I didn't miss anything, to try and really organise myself for the coming days. One of the main things we've got to try and do this week is to really just nail this pipeline. As I'm always talking about, pipeline is the most important thing for us, because without that we don't really have a business. So clearly last week we mentioned some of the issues that we're having on the supply of materials and the fluctuating prices due to the gas hike around the world, the gas price hikes around the world. So that's something else that we've got to keep an eye on. I'll get down to site and check and see how things are getting on. One of the key things also that needs to be looked at this week, and often gets overlooked, is that when you go out and meet individuals, you have to make sure that you follow up, and it really is the art of the follow-up that's important. Quite often we're always out trying to find new angles, trying to find new relationships, new contacts, so that we can do certain things. But quite often all we need to do is just capitalise and nurture those relationships that we've already got, those initial relationships. Sometimes they die quite quickly because there's no follow-up. So it's the art of the follow-up that is something that really needs to be looked at. And this week I'm going to make sure that we follow up on the meetings that we had with the landowner from last week that wants to do something with us, and a couple of other new contacts that we've made. We have to make sure that there is significant follow-through so that we can move those relationships forward and see whether or not there's any merit in the discussions that we initially had. So that's certainly something that's going to be looked at this week, and certainly something that can't be overlooked. Otherwise you spend more time chasing new contacts instead of nurturing those that you've already got. I kicked off the week by doing something slightly different, in that we are looking for a new marketing director, and rather than just putting out the typical ad in LinkedIn or other media, we thought that we would conduct an interview and make it a little bit more convivial.
So in 5 words,
what does Convivia do?
Please give me a bit of notice before you're going to spring a question like that on me, so I can be prepared. Click on the link to see the full video, and if you know anybody, pass it on to them or get in touch if it's you. Meanwhile, the guys are having a discussion in the office following a group WhatsApp exchange that I had with Richard earlier in the day over unnecessary meetings. Richard proposed that Tom held a meeting with me to discuss something which I thought, frankly, could have been discussed over the telephone in 2 minutes, and it was unnecessary to convene a meeting and waste everybody's time.
It was a very funny conversation, I have to say. It was very entertaining. It just felt like two kids arguing.
Oh, what, Roy and Richard?
Yeah, about the need for stuff like that. I was worried at some point someone would be like, "Oh, Anish, what do you think?"
Well, since you mentioned it, Anish, go on in.
I was going to be like, I feel like I'm having to pick between my mum and dad.
Is it Mummy Convivia or Daddy Convivia?
No, it sounds
Where
like
will
it's,
we live if they get divorced?
Exactly.
it's alright to cancel it.
No, I think the principle of what Roy was trying to say makes sense. It's kind of like, look, we can just have a phone conversation. Well, I say we, the people involved in the call, I agree with Roy. We can just have that phone conversation. This is what I would say. What you would say. What do you think?
Tom, you got a view?
Well, yeah, to be fair, I mean, it's perfect sense.
Now that that's all cleared up, Richard sent some instructions over to Anish to implement a new policy.
Ortega, I need your attention. Thomas, gasoline, public service announcement. Martin, public service announcement. Right, we have. All right, these are very important. Why do you have a ruler in your hand? These are very important things that we need to follow these. And this is sounds like a joke, but it's actually very serious, right? These are 3 key things that we need to follow going forward as part of the business, right? When it comes to meetings. First one is we need to cancel any meeting that does not have an agenda or a clear meeting outcome. So prior to any meeting being proposed, we need to set up or have an agenda ready with a clear outcome. So it can't just be ramble on for the next 20 minutes. What is the outcome of this meeting? That has to be the start when planning in the meeting. The second point is to encourage team members to decline meetings if it's not best use of their time. So if anybody's in a meeting which they feel like they shouldn't be, or they can't add any value, or there's no value in them being in that meeting, then they should be encouraged to decline, or just decline on their own accord, and obviously have a justification behind it. And the last one is to end every meeting with a wrap up. So at the end of every meeting there needs to be a summary that basically sums up what the objective was at the beginning, and at the end how we achieved that objective, have we now left knowing exactly what we set out to achieve by the end of the meeting. So those are three key things we need to follow going forward. And if it doesn't fit into those three categories, or something breaks out of that, then the meeting should not take place. We got.
Can I have a check?
No. Absolutely. We can have a meeting to discuss it.
Can't go now.
Put it over there,
I
Jane.
think we wrap it up at the end.
Yeah, we have to wrap around.
Alright, fine.
That's
And
it. Those are key rules. So
Biscuits are obligatory.
Biscuits
Yes.
are a must.
Rule 4.
By the time I always get to the biscuit box, it's usually the worst selection available. Exciting box. And the three driest biscuits has been left in this box. So today I'm off to visit a school in Wembley, which is something which is probably a bit unusual, right, for what we do. Nothing to do with development, nothing to do with property at all. So why? Well, simply the school, Michaela Community School, they do things completely differently and have a totally different way of thinking, challenged convention in the way of education, and this school definitely does things outside the box. So when I go down there, have a tour, see what it's all about, hopefully get to speak to the head, who happens to have a pretty important role now as a government advisor by taking this different way of thinking, known also as the strictest head in the country. Just want to see what this is all about, maybe get some inspiration, maybe get some ideas in terms of how to tackle the challenges that we've got with public housing, and see if there's any possibility of marrying what we're doing with the tenants in our buildings, but certainly insofar as young children are concerned. So let's see what this is all about. What an extraordinary school. A school where it's impossible for students to hide in the lessons. They're routinely encouraged to go beyond their classroom teachings and do their own private study. And even lunch breaks are utilised. So whilst they eat, they learn. All wrapped with principles of success and a nice dollop of discipline. What a convivial way to learn. And then it was back to the office to have a design discussion with our specialist to consider the specifics of what we're putting into the building in Maidstone.
So I think it was just really to confirm some of that, and then also just some questions on the communal areas that we just wanted to kind of confirm really. So obviously we talked about in the document that I think Elle you put together, didn't you, in September for us, which was excellent. And it was obviously the key elements for the communal areas are based on the education, health and fitness. I think one thing we talked about last time with William and the team is they're going to produce some little 3Ds.
Right.
So they'll do like a little walkthrough really for us, because they've got all the software to do that. So I think that will help kind of explain and visualise for us how that will work. Like for storage, if we can build that within the benches and joinery where possible, so kind of try and be smart with that. We're going to provide all the additional FF&E, I believe. So all the additional seating and equipment will be through them. So that's all part of their package.
So it's been a busy day today. Started off with a meeting with my financial director just to go through a lot of strategy. Lots of money obviously floating around when you're doing projects such as this. Have to work out what's going where, when we make certain payments. When you're running a construction site, cash flow is key, so we have to keep an eye on that very closely. materials orders, we have to watch that, make sure that funds are at the right place at the right time. Dealing with the issues with the fuel increase and how that impacts on our cash flow and our prices. So I had to go through a lot of bits and pieces with her earlier on. Unusually, unlike all other discussions with the finance team and accountants, this was more positive as we spoke about the future and what we're going to be doing to prepare as we go forwards. Breakfast helped to remind us that things are looking up.
Breakfast has arrived and I'm not quite sure if they're trying to say something. Katie's is a little bit better. There we go. Got a convivial breakfast.
Now where were we? But had to fit in this site visit today. It's not something which is essential, but I like to do it simply to keep on top of where we are on site, to know what's going on. It's all good and well having information fed back, and our project manager feeds back on a weekly basis with photographs and the like, and a decent report telling us where we are on site, but I like to try and see it for myself. Not because there's a lack of trust, clearly that isn't the case, but the reason why I like to get down is because sometimes there are things that happen on site which may not be worthy of being detailed on the report summary that the project manager submits, but it may be something of interest, I don't know. When I come down previously, the foreman may bring certain things to my attention that he's not happy with regards to communication with the office, little things like that. So they may not find themselves naturally into a box on the report schedule, but it's certainly something that if it's not gotten hold of as a matter of urgency can begin to present an issue as time goes on. From this site visit, no issues at all. I'm surprised to learn, which is a little bit concerning because there's always some problem or other. Nothing at the moment, no concerns. Guys are down here today doing a final measure up on the windows before the windows come and before the final order is signed off. We need to make sure that all the aperture dimensions are accurate. Windows are something that are clearly made to order. You don't buy them off the shelf. They're made to order and the factory needs to get it right, or rather they need to get it right based on the information that we give to them. So if we give them the wrong information, we're going to have an awful lot of windows for 90, around 90 apartments that don't fit. So we have to measure and measure again to make sure that those dimensions are 100% accurate to the millimetre. Because once those windows arrive here, it's one-way traffic. You can't return to sender, there's no refunds. I'll end up with an awful lot of windows in my home, or they'll be finding a lot of windows on an auction site near you very soon. So it's an easy situation to deal with. You just have to measure and measure and measure and measure and then measure again. I think you get the measure of what I'm trying to say. So yeah, there we are. No issues, good site, no problems at all, nice and clean. That's another thing, walking around the site, just looking to see how clean it is. The guys are doing a great job here. The site is immaculate. You have to be very careful on sites that you don't breach any rules, any health and safety rules with wires hanging, stringing across corridors, rubbish in the hallways. The site is clean. So what we have here is we have one designated cleaner. His job as one of the workers on site is to go behind and just clean up everything, clean up all the mess to make sure that the site is immaculate. And if you've got a clean site, the work is a lot tidier as well, and it's a lot safer. So clean site, nice bright site, no issues with health and safety, all looking good. But these are the little things that can trip you up if you're not careful. And the last thing you want to have is the health and safety directorate come down and shut down the site for hours or days even if you're not careful. So that's something that we're quite proud of here. There we are, the guys busy moving down so we're now on level 4 from level 7 all the way down, doing all the boarding out. Just laying out basically, making sure that all the dimensions are clearly right. So what the guys will do is they will work from plans, clear plans. You can see it here. So what the guys will do is they'll work from plans to make sure that everything is being laid out at the correct places, it makes sense, right? But this is the sort of thing that they'll work from, and there'll be a few of these knocking around, and they'll use these plans to lay out in the right place. You don't want to obviously get the walls in the wrong places. Walls aren't so easy to move. So that's what they'll be doing on site. They'll be working through that again down to the last millimetre accurate, and they'll be measuring as they go all the time, because there are national space standards that have to be adhered to. So we have to make sure that those units, when finished with the insulation and so on and so forth, bearing in mind as you're laying out a space and you're putting on more plasterboard to build out the wall, the rooms are getting smaller and smaller and smaller once you've got the insulation and the infill and so on and so forth. If you make those rooms too small because your first line was in the wrong place and that final measurement is below national space standards, then the rooms are not compliant. So those are the sorts of things which means why we're always having to measure up to make sure that we're totally compliant, because it could end up costing a lot of money if the guys get it wrong. So as the guys are laying out the walls on the upper floors, on the lower floors, some of them will have already been demolished, and some of them are in the final stages of demolition. But just to give you an idea of what we're working with, before all the walls are put in, it looks something like this. So it's difficult to give you the full impression from walking down a corridor, but this is what the floor plate looks like in the absence of all the walls. So this is what they start with, and then they start to, well, erect all the walls. But in fact, I say this is what they start with. This is what they're starting with when they start laying up the walls. But prior to that, you can imagine this is an office, so you've got lots of partitions, and perhaps here you'll get an indication of it, where you can see where the walls used to be. If you look along the floor, the black lines, these would have been little offices. Again, the black lines is where walls were. So all that demolished. And then we start building. We start building the walls, start putting the electrical, the mechanical and engineering, which is the pipes and the cables, run all of that so we can have all the services go into the various apartments. And then finally we close up all the walls so you can't see the M&E, the mechanical and engineering, pipes and electric, and then we start doing all the pretty stuff. So there we go. We thought we'd make this week's corridor challenge a little bit more interesting and spice it up to make it more evenly matched than the super competitive Anish against, well, poor old Alex. So this week we found a competitor who is, well, more on all fours with Alex. Meet Zeus. This is Ash's dog, and like Alex, he's cute, rolls over and likes his tummy tickled, and okay, look, the real reason he's an obvious competitor for Alex is that, frankly, they both got little legs. Now, which is faster, man or dog? Alex versus Zeus. Let's find out.
He's got little legs. It's okay.
Did you nearly beat Alex? Do you reckon you can beat Alex?
Sit. Good boy, sit. Good boy, sit. 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 Come on, Zeus. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Good boy. Come on. With a time of 5.92 seconds to beat, is Zeus faster than Alex? Let's see. Alex keeps his pride intact. He is faster than a dog. We trot off back to work. Keep convivial, and we'll see you next week.